it was a very unsophisticated kind of place, but most people were very honest. And of course, we never thought, we didn't even have locks on our doors. And in fact, I lived in a dog trot house, a very old one. I don't know the date of it, but it wasn't until the year that I went away to college that Daddy built a new house. And times were very hard, of course, soon after I was born. And I can't say much about those first 5 years. When I was 5 years old, we did move to a Greenbrier farm for just 1 year, and then came back to this place which my daddy had bought 80 acres of land from his uncle who raised him. And this brings me to say that when my daddy he was born in 1902, and when he was 7 years old, his father was going rabbit hunting with just an old-fashioned shotgun, and he was climbing a fence and shot his big toe off. And this was before penicillin or before tetanus shots, and he got gangrene, which was a very deadly thing, and died when my daddy was 7. Soon after she remarried, she died. Now, I'm not sure of her cause of death. I suspect it was pneumonia. That was what killed a large number of people. And that was before the flu epidemic of 1918. So Daddy was one of 3 surviving children. His daddy was just 29 years old when he died, and his mother was just 31. And so he had a sister 2 years older and a brother 2 years younger. There had been 3 other children born to this couple, but it was not unusual for babies to die as infants because there were no super drugs or anything like that at the time, and not many doctors. The only doctor in Greenbrier was miles away and had to come by, I guess, in the earliest days of my life, by buggy or wagon, although he soon got a car. We didn't have a car until I was, probably 10 years old or something like that. I don't know how much you know about horses and mules, but mules are work animals for the whole agricultural South, where cotton was king at that time, even after the Civil War. How did we move, you ask? We had wagons and we had buggies, but the mules were the ones who pulled those. And if we needed to go to Greenbrier, which was maybe 3 miles from us, it was a little trip to go even there to see the doctor. And the doctor made house calls. And of course, all the babies were born at home. We didn't know about the hospital. There was a small hospital early on in Conway, which was like 10 or 12 miles away, and it would be a trip. In fact, our shopping would be about twice a year. We would go in the wagon to Conway, and it'd probably take an hour. I can't remember exactly because I was real small at that time, but we would go down in the spring and usually again in the fall. And of course, some people made trips in between for supplies and that sort of thing. But of course, you'd buy a 50-pound sack of flour and a 50-pound sack of sugar and maybe a 10-pound sack of salt, of the essentials for cooking. And of course, we always had good food. We never knew we were poor. Everybody around us was poor. And we did have plenty to eat. We had a good garden spot, and a big one, And we grew lots of vegetables. And Mother, as other housewives did, canned in glass jars. And it was good when we got a pressure cooker, pressure canner. And, dozens of green beans and dozens of tomatoes and corn. And my daddy helped because this would be in the summer when the crops would have been laid by so that they could grow and mature in the hottest part of the summer. And he was helping can one day, can corn, and it was, for some reason, more tedious than other kinds of canning. It was easy to can green beans and tomatoes, but he had an explosion, and the corn covered his left arm and just took all of the skin off of that. And of course, it took a long time for it to heal, but it did heal successfully. And we knew it was hard times, but we thought it was supposed to be that way because it had come on gradually. And by the 30s, when I was 5 years old in 1930, and I started school when I was 5, just for a little while. And I did ride, well, no, we walked a mile to the Spring Hill School and back, but it was bad. There was no money, and you used to live on what you had mostly. Like I said, now we would grow a few bales of cotton in the fall, and we'd have just a little bit of money, but it was so sparse. But we never went hungry, and we didn't have that kind of devastation in our little community. We had a lot of support. And then I guess there came a few government programs. I know there was a mattress making. The government supplied the ticking for mattresses and the cotton batting to fill mattresses, and there would be a community group meet at the church to make new mattresses. And just there were a few other government programs where they gave out supplies like of essential things for cooking, like flour and of course during Second World War, which was a decade later, there were rationing programs, but by then times were a little bit better, but there were rationing programs, and you just, nobody, it didn't matter if you had money or not, you couldn't buy sugar and you couldn't buy tires, and you couldn't, well, you'd get a minimum a few gallons of gasoline if you had a car.
What was it like on a day where you had to go into town?
Daddy had to hitch up the horses to the wagon, and we went to, and I had an aunt who lived in Greenbrier, one of Mother's sisters, and of course we'd always visit her. And my grandmother lived in Greenbrier off and on. She moved around quite a bit after. I don't know much about their early farming experience, but my grandpa was not very successful as a farmer, and so they moved around quite a bit, but lived in the vicinity of Greenbrier most of that time, so we'd probably visit with them. And of course, if it was a trip to see the doctor, he had an office there in Greenbrier. And we'd go to, they had 3 or 4 stores, grocery store, well, they were general merchandise. They also carried like cotton fabric and for the women to sew with, and feed for animals, and it was a general stores, but we would buy supplies with whatever little bit of money we could get. We did have some music in the community. Our next door neighbor was a family of musicians. They were all boys, and they played the guitar and the banjo and the tambourine and uh, the fiddle, it was called. We didn't have violins; they were fiddles. To this day, I don't think there's any difference between a fiddle and a violin. Although it was all country tunes. And we would go down to our neighbor's house on Saturday nights, my family did, because they had a battery radio. Now, it was, probably 18 inches wide and 8 or 10 inches high, and it had big batteries in it to operate. Now, reception was not very good, especially if the weather was stormy. There would be lots of static, so it was difficult to hear. But we'd listen to the Grand Ole Opry and Fibber McGee and Molly and Lum and Abner and Laurel and Hardy. Those are some of the programs I remember. And then when I got into high school, we got a radio at home, and again, it was batteries because we didn't have electricity, like I said, until after I graduated. But there was a story hour, and one of the ongoing stories, like the TV shows, One Day at a Time, and those that have been long-running shows.
Soap operas.
Soap operas, yes, that kind of thing. Portia Loves Life was the name of the show, and I couldn't wait to get home off the school bus and turn the radio on to hear that story, to see what was going to happen next. We did play games at school, mostly outside, and the schoolhouse was next door to the church, and on above the schoolhouse was the cemetery, and the cemetery is still there. And I mentioned that Spring Hill Cemetery, and the Kirbys, and I was Etoyle Kirby, are buried there, and my mother and daddy are buried there. But my brother, whose wife was killed in a car accident many years ago, she's buried outside of Little Rock there at Pinecrest. I think I'm not sure if it's still in Pulaski County. And then my sister is buried in Conway, and she died in 2000. She was 2 years younger than I was.
What was your dating life? Like, when did that start, and then how did that progress?
Well, I wasn't really interested in the boys. In fact, I was planning to be an old maid school teacher, and I was serious about that until the first year I was teaching school, and I'll say more about that later. And I met Billy, my husband. But I really was not interested in the boys. Now, and I just had one special girlfriend. It just happened that there weren't many girls my age, my particular year. There were at least 4 I can think of, but 2 of us just did everything together. In fact, Mother and Daddy fought that. They wanted us to be a little more, but we were intellectually oriented, and the other kids were not. And it was just a natural thing. She was 2 years older than I was. She was my brother's age, but we were great friends. But she went to college 2 years before I did, and she prepared to teach, and did teach in Arkansas a few years. Then she went to New Mexico to teach, and I pretty much lost contact with her after that, my very best friend. But my sister, 2 years younger, had a whole group of girls, friends, and I would sometimes do things with them, but I really wasn't interested in that. In fact, earlier than that, I wasn't interested in dolls, and it was just as well because we couldn't afford many dolls. I know one Christmas, I don't remember how old I was. I must have been 8 or 9 years old, and I got a doll for Christmas, and she was I can remember still what she looked like. She had a blue organdy dress, and she was a little girl doll, not a baby doll. But my sister got a baby doll, and if you're going to have a doll, that's the kind to have, is a baby doll, so you can cuddle them and that sort of thing. She was a more normal, and she was more like a tomboy, and her friends, you know, played outside a lot. But at school, we would play games like Red Rover, and I don't know if you know that game, but the whole group chooses up sides, just two sides, and the sides stand several, probably 10 or 15 feet opposite, maybe 20 feet, and they run at each other, and I can't recall what the point of that was, but one of the years, I think I was 8 years old, when one of my friends was running backward and I was running forward, and her head hit my nose and fractured it. But it didn't hurt that much, and you know, I just went on home, and of course I told Mother about it, but it didn't bother me or anything. But then in a day or two it started getting black and blue, and we went to church on Sunday. By then it was blue all across my face from one ear to the other, and people were very candid. You know, they told it like it was. They said, "What in the world is wrong with that child?" You know, and it scared us. So we went to the doctor that in Greenbrier that afternoon, Sunday afternoon, and the doctor looked at it and he said, "Well, it is fractured, but it's already started healing, and I would have to re-break it to straighten it," and said, "I don't think it's going to ever bother you, but if you want me to do it, I will." We said no, and so my nose has been pretty flat up there ever since. It has never bothered me at all.
Were your parents very, were they affectionate? Did they tell you they loved you a lot? Like, what was that relationship like?
I can't recall our talking about "I love you." They demonstrated love always and everything. In fact, I told you that I went to the two-room schoolhouse through the 8th grade, and I know that in the wintertime, of course we don't have a lot of snow and ice in Arkansas, but one year I recall it did come a snow a few inches, and Daddy came to school, brought one of the mules, and for Betty and me to ride back, to take us home on the mule, just because of the snow and ice. And I mean, that's a way of demonstrating love. He wouldn't have had to do that. We could have walked through it. We wore high-top shoes and brown cotton stockings, and my sister did not like those brown cotton stockings. And so when we would leave the house, get a distance from the house in the morning, she would roll her stockings down to her ankles, and then she had to roll them back up before she got home. We didn't know that kids could do what they wanted to do, and we didn't expect it, and so we didn't ask for things. We knew there was no money. My mother would sometimes sell a dozen eggs for a dime, and by the way, there was a man a couple of miles away from us who was a barber, and I think he charged 10 cents or a quarter for a haircut. But Daddy, my daddy got some hair cutting equipment, and he cut hair for several people, and I think he got 10 cents a piece for it when he did.
You talked about being disciplined at school. How was discipline handled at your home?
Well, you know, if we needed paddling, we got it. I think I got one or two in my life, but our parents were pretty reasonable. And of course, my brother was 2 years older, and boys were valued more than girls back then. And he got a bicycle, and Betty and I never had a bicycle. After he got too big, I guess, to ride it, we could ride his bicycle, but we never got a bicycle.
When you talk about women being valued less, was that at the time? Did that bother you?
Well, that's just the way it was. You didn't think about that. You didn't talk about that. No, the woman's place was in the home, and the mothers, the housewives, taught the girls how to. I was cutting corn on the cob, off the cob the other day, and I thought, this is the way my mother did it. She took the tops off the corn, and you need a really sharp knife for cutting corn off of a cob, but it makes wonderful cream style corn. You don't get that kind of corn anymore. And
When did that start to change?
oh, of course, it's been so long, and it's been gradual. But after World War II, things became different.